Welcome to Intelligent Automation Radio, the number one podcast for IT executives seeking insights on the impact and opportunities for innovation that automation is delivering to businesses around the world. Featuring thought leaders in AI, machine learning, orchestration, security automation, and the future of work. And now, on with the show. Welcome everyone. My name is Guy Nadivi, and I'm the host of Intelligent Automation Radio. Our guest on today's episode is Gaurav Dhillon, Chairman and CEO of SnapLogic, one of the world's leading providers of integration platform as a service, also known as iPaaS. The ability to integrate data, applications, and devices, especially in the cloud, is fundamental to digital transformation. Robust integration capabilities enable the convergence of technologies, which powers the Internet of Things and other ubiquitous computing paradigms. When everything is integrated, automation, analytics, and AI can have a profound impact on the way things work, as well as the future of work. So we've invited Gaurav onto the podcast today to get his high-level perspective on the state of integrations and what direction things are going in. Gaurav, welcome to Intelligent Automation Radio.
Thank you, Guy. It's a pleasure to be here, and I look forward to our conversation.
Gaurav, you've been leading SnapLogic for over a dozen years now as chairman and CEO. How has the role of integration platform as a service, iPaaS, evolved during that time?
Well, it's funny. You don't look at these things as much as you should. But yeah, we came up with the idea. We did some research for a couple of years, and then we've been building this out for the past I'd say 7 odd years. So yes, the time adds up on these things. The evolution has been towards greater and greater automation. Hence, our interest in this podcast, and the topic of your conversation is very, very much of interest to us and to the kind of folks we talk to. If you think about integration in the age of the cloud, there are 2 things you want to do. You want to do things simpler. You want to embrace more and more people in the enterprise. And at the same time, you want to lasso, be able to connect as many endpoints as the enterprise is building up today. So the only way to tackle that ease of use and scatter diagram is to have a high degree of automation. And I would say the evolution of iPaaS has been towards automating more and more of that.
Is there a single metric, like ROI, that best captures the impact of incorporating integration platform as a service into an automation project?
Well, intuitively, we do know that the way to do integration is to use a product, any product, or to have your own team do it. So at a very back of the envelope level, it's a build versus buy, and then you have to manage the break fix or whatever you've built. But I think the better understanding is we had a group of folks from Forrester Research conduct a survey of our customers. They independently go out and do these things to look at a total economic impact of somebody using SnapLogic to do their work. And what we found is that the customers they surveyed got nearly $1 million in incremental revenue per year. They were able to reduce their costs on doing the integration by about 70%. And they found a savings of $1.7 million over 3 years and about $770,000 in productivity gains. So when he added it all up, it was like a 498%, and I was thinking to myself, boy, we should try harder, make it. So kind of a 500% return on investment on using SnapLogic iPaaS in the enterprise.
That's amazing. Gaurav, the pandemic has created a lot of disruption over the last year. What role do you feel automation has played in enabling the remote workforce to survive or even thrive during the pandemic? And has working from home perhaps made resiliency more important than things like cost savings as a justification to invest more in automation?
I would have to agree. Agility, the ability to deal with large changes and requirements, being nimble, has come to the fore like never before. We have so many customers who had to quickly adjust to a working from home reality. We've got airlines whose planes aren't flying. retail customers whose stores are closed. So agility, being nimble, being resilient, I think has come to the fore in the pandemic. And this is very important because when you think of enterprise apps, you don't think so the first things that come to mind are more personal productivity apps, like, oh, how do I go to Zoom and how do I make sure my all the email and personal productivity apps can work from home and all that. And since we do so much of that, I think that is what people think about when they think of sort of this pandemic pivot. But the reality is, not being in the office at all means even your back office apps have to be wired very differently. And for many, many customers, it means they have to invent new processes on the fly within a week to cater to the new reality of everybody working from home, not having stores, not having the ability to return products in a store that you might have ordered online. And how do you invent a completely new process for returning? For a law firm, it means their partners have to be able to use a bunch of apps from wherever they might be and accelerated move from traditional back office apps into cloud apps so they can access the various bits of information they need about their clients anywhere in the world they might be. And these days, at home. So that has been absolutely key.
Where do you think things go from here for automation, and how will its role evolve in the post-pandemic recovery period?
Right. We think a lot about that, and we've been polling our customer advisors about that a lot. The accumulated weight of that is that there will be the vaccine has arrived, and for some of us, there's this new have not class of people, isn't there now? Those who have the vaccines and those who don't. But that vaccine has created, I certainly would say, a new hope. Also created a new normal. The world of being offline and being online are going to coexist forever. I was speaking to a customer in the pharmaceutical business, and they mentioned that because of the vaccine in one of their geographies, doctors are coming back, patients are able to come back in. If the doctor is vaccinated, the patient has a vaccine, you can come in and you can have more in-person visits. But the online nature of being completely shut down in the pandemic is not going away. And this is true everywhere. I think businesses are going to operate in a new normal where you don't go into the office because you have to, you go into the office because you want to. And I believe we're going to see people start to think about their output, start to think about what they got accomplished in a way that gives them flexibility. And that is going to require another set of agilities, another, would you say, pivot into the new normal.
I'm sure you saw some very interesting applications of iPaaS during the last year due to the pandemic. I'm curious if there were any particular ones that stood out for you due to their impact in improving business processes or helping organizations pivot during that time.
We sure did, Guy. And, I have to say, hats off to our customers, some of whom in the retail business, in the pharmaceutical business, had to deal with massive changes or massive new pressures to help their own customers and to be more productive at that time. Boy, a few examples that spring to mind. Brown's Shoes, a big retailer, had just become a customer of ours about the early part of last year. Then the pandemic hit. And they had 68 stores closed. Everything shut down. So literally less than 2 days, they added new applications and processes to support how the distribution centers work in a time where there is no more retail. How do you rewire the inventory? How do you automate the processes of returns, automate the processes of customer loyalty and other kinds of things in a completely work from home, no stores kind of world? Other stories come to mind are DaVita. They're in the business of providing dialysis. They had to deal with how do they track COVID inventory, vaccine inventory. They had to track with how they comply with new regulations, various reporting statuses, and so on, and do that all literally in real time. Because when you're going into the facility to get dialysis, you have to. I mean, this is the definition of mission critical. Aramark, the giant services provider, a customer of ours, had to deal with a complete shutdown of sports. They have 80,000 employees. They do much of the work that you see in sports and stadiums, the food services, other kind of services. They had to completely rewire. They had to go from things that could be done in paper, where you would have a ticket, you would have some kind of form you could fill out, to a completely touchless experience, a completely smartphone experience, and make sure all those things work, not just at the phone level, but at the back office level. And and perhaps hats off to our customer AstraZeneca, who has had to rewire so many things to ramp up production of the AstraZeneca Oxford vaccine, and to be able to ship that, to track that, and move that around globally.
We're beginning to hear more and more about hyperautomation, a new term to characterize the integration of automation, analytics, and AI to bridge silos within an enterprise. Will hyperautomation democratize technologies so people outside of IT will be less reliant on IT?
Yes, and to some extent, no. So let me first of all jump in and say we are pleased to see a recognition in the industry, whether it's Gartner with hyperautomation or Horses for Courses, Phil First, with his integrated automation platforms, bold headline, RPA is dead, long live integrated automation. So to answer your question directly, we feel, and I certainly feel, that this way of bringing together multiple ways to connect the enterprise into a combined, a unified platform does help, because most of the frustration and most of the reason why people brought in RPA initially and then now hyperautomation is things don't connect in the business. And therefore using all sorts of piecemeal solutions to try to connect them, whether you have end user solutions or you have back office solutions or APIs or whatever, doing them in multiple places creates yet another layer of headache and just a different kind of sprawl. So bringing it into one place that is easy to use, that has a lot of AI, I believe is going to help end users do automation in a way that is going to really cut through that sort of Gordian knot, if you would, that mess jumble of how things talk to each other, and then going into the pandemic and coming out of the pandemic, creating additional time pressures and a lot of band-aids that need to be thought through.
There's also a lot of talk these days about low code, no code automation and the rise of citizen developers as a result. How will iPaaS help accelerate the mainstreaming of citizen developers?
Yeah, if you think about low code, no code, it is a natural outgrowth. Someone in an enterprise is these days much more computer savvy than they were 20 years ago. Millennials may not be programmers, but they understand how to work with technology in a way that is radically different from 20 years ago. These millennials are tech savvy in my mind, and given the right kind of interface, whether it's at a personal level, like an iPhone, when you're setting up an email on the iPhone, or you're setting up ways in which you can connect across various apps, or in an enterprise context using a modern iPaaS, it's something that is easy to use, which is sadly very rare in the enterprise, but modern products like ours have worked very hard to provide scale and self-service at the same time. So using self-service, we see end users, or we see citizens being able to cut through log jams in a federated way that lets them have their cake and eat it too. So what do I mean by that? I was just listening to our customer, Schneider Electric, present how they're working with the citizens at Schneider Electric to be able to wire up, to be able to manage their needs for data access, to connect the apps and connect the various back office systems. By going to a self-service model that is federated, you have central IT involved with the business people. Central IT looks at the security concerns, system performance, data governance, et cetera, type of centralized concerns, and the citizens can get data and they can build these connections themselves with the right platform. We would say SnapLogic is a fine one. And then central IT blesses it and it goes into production. So in that federated model, we get to have our cake and eat it too in the enterprise. Because if we just let's give people something and say, hack at it, you're very quickly going to create a whole new set of sprawl and disorganization, security holes, system performance issues. And if we keep it too centralized, you run up against sort of the DMV model and the 5-year plan of the Russian sort of from the communist era where nothing happens and half of these things fail. It takes too long. So that federalized model with the iPaaS frees up citizens in a way that is quite magical and has been, I would say, one of the most satisfying things that I've seen over the past 10 years as we built up the company.
Gaurav, given the growth in deployments of automation, especially this past year, I think much of our audience will be curious to hear your answer to this question. Regardless of whether I'm a college graduate entering the IT job market or a seasoned IT professional looking to change specialties, what skills should I focus on acquiring to accelerate my career in the automation field?
Great question. So let's take it into somebody who is in college or recently graduated or something like that. And let's then look at what might be the right piece of advice of someone who's a seasoned professional. So for someone who's, say, still in college, I would say understand or take courses in business that gives you empathy for the organization. How you manage the books, what are some of the underpinning of how capital and cash flows through a company, what are the fundamental principles of product positioning, place, sort of marketing, demand generation are very important to know. So getting the business basics are very important. And I would say the way to get sort of empathy for data, which is the underlying driver of a lot of automation projects, is to become smart about economics. Take a course in economics. It's very hard to get seasoned data scientists. There's like a shortfall of 300,000 jobs. But if you have computer savvy and you understand economics, you can become a data scientist, particularly if you have some business empathy. So I would say developing an empathy for the organization, which as a new graduate or a student you don't have, and developing an empathy for data, do that combined would be just a fantastic way to enter the field of automation. And many colleges these days, even if you're getting a degree in, say, biochemistry, one of our E-team members, one of our executives' daughter just graduated UCLA with a biology degree, and she had to take a course in Python programming to get a degree. And there's some wisdom to that. You don't want to need to become a programmer, but understanding how modern languages work is a good thing. So to me, that's advice for somebody who is new in their career. For a seasoned professional, I would say understanding the leverage in today's platforms, understanding the impact of artificial intelligence to be able to recognize patterns and getting from manual to automatic, getting enterprises from manual labor to automation gives them so much benefit. We've had enterprise customers retire tens and tens of millions of technology debt by moving to automation using iPaaS rather than a legacy integration approach. So getting a grasp of the impact of modern automated platforms, most iPaaS, ours included, is cheerfully willing to provide training for free. And getting that learning management system, getting that training is a valuable step in then being able to apply that into an enterprise.
Given your perspective on iPaaS and automation, what do you think are going to be some of the biggest disruptions we'll see in the next 1 to 3 years in those fields?
Guy, our earliest investor was in Andreessen Horowitz, and I had worked with them in the past, and but I really like what they came up with as part of their strategy in building their venture firm. And their bold prediction was software eats the world, And our take on that is AI is going to eat iPaaS and automation. I shake my head in disbelief when I look at some of the graphical editing tools with which you can build RPA flows. Like, why? Why would you automate manually? So I think the biggest change is going to happen in the next, say 3 to 5 years, maybe not in 2 years, but I would say in the 3-year time horizon, is AI eats RPA. The recognition that these processes are processes that a mining technology can find, and the right artificial intelligence with the right data sets can recognize and automatically put together in ways in which you can get a purchase order, in which you can have a customer make a journey through various systems, ways in which your employees get onboarded, and when they retire, how do you systematically remove their access to various degrees. That being truly, truly automatic by using AI and really good connectivity at the endpoints, I think is going to be very, very much a reality in the next 3 years, possibly 5, depending on the kind of business somebody's in. But for common business problems, it's going to be real automation, not manual automation as you see today.
Gaurav, for the CIOs, CTOs, and other IT executives listening in, what is the one big must-have piece of advice you'd like them to take away from our discussion with regards to implementing automation and iPaaS at their organization?
It's a great question. For somebody, a CXO or a senior person in any enterprise today, the challenge is how to innovate at scale. We see innovation around us in our personal lives, from Google's autocomplete to smartphones to a variety of technologies that we use and enjoy, streaming services, video, etc. But it's very difficult in the enterprise to provide that same kind of wow factor. And to my mind, it is difficult because to innovate, you have to bring in a lot of things, but to do it at scale, they have to work together cohesively. The most important consideration for a CIO, a CTO, is how to make the sum, how to make the whole greater than the sum of the parts, because there's too many parts. And if things are done piecemeal, to Gartner's hyper-automation point, to Phil first, and their point about, piecemeal RPA is dead, long live integrated automation, making the whole greater than the sum of the parts, having clear architecture, having good platforms that bring it together is absolutely key, or the sprawl will kill you. That sprawl, something coming in here, something going there, having hundreds of applications that are not quite orchestrated is a recipe for disaster, is to my mind, is a career-risking move. And people really ought to figure out how to have clarity in their architecture and then a high degree of automation to make the whole greater than the sum of the parts.
Intriguing. All right. Looks like that's all the time we have for on this episode of Intelligent Automation Radio. Gaurav, it occurred to me during our discussion that integrations are one of those things people really don't think much about because they're in the background and they just work. It's kind of like that old commercial about the Maytag repairman being bored all the time because Maytag's appliances were so reliable, there was nothing for him to do. And I think it's the same with integrations and with iPaaS. It's so reliable and yet so critical to the delivery of so many services that perhaps we don't appreciate the complex value propositions that iPaaS and integrations provide. Thank you so much for coming on to the podcast and illuminating the important role companies like SnapLogic play in our modern data-driven world.
Thank you, Guy. It was my pleasure. You're right. It's a bit of a back office topic, but becoming more important by the day as more and more SaaS applications and more data comes into the enterprise and in every job function.
Gaurav Dhillon, Chairman and CEO of SnapLogic. Thank you for listening, everyone. And remember, don't hesitate. Automate. Thank you so much for listening today. Please subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, SoundCloud, Spotify, or anywhere else you listen to podcasts. We publish new shows regularly, and you won't want to miss one. And please remember to give us a rating. It helps others find the show. Intelligent Automation Radio is sponsored by Ayehu, the leader in intelligent automation solutions for IT and cybersecurity. You can get more information about Ayehu by visiting our website at ayehu.com. That's AYEHU.com. Ayehu, creating the successful path to the self-driving enterprise.